artists who have explored so many different musical genres, and that is because of the nature of my Vietnam War and independence from British colonialists. Rocksteady music was expressing all of this. Dynamic sound, Alton Ellis and Ken Boothe telling. And they were closing, and I went in, and there were three brothers of them, and I sang the song for them. I said, I sing, and I sang. Okay, I sang, and then that was it. And
Before we start this story, answer me something in the comments. Do you know Jimmy Cliff? Have you heard of him? Comment down below because I bet you know his music even without knowing it was him who sang it. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this man deserved much more recognition than he got. So stay with me until the end, because this story will surprise you in ways you can't imagine. There's a moment in music history where everything changes, where a door opens and never closes again, where a sound that was imprisoned on a small Caribbean island explodes onto the entire planet and transforms global culture forever. And if you think this story begins with Bob Marley, you're completely wrong. Because before Marley was known worldwide, before reggae became an international phenomenon, before everyone wore dreadlocks and talked about Jah, there was a 14-year-old boy walking the dusty roads of Jamaica with literally nothing in his pockets except a dream that seemed impossible. And this boy was called James Chambers, but the whole world would know him as Jimmy Cliff. And tell me in the comments if you already knew that it was he who opened the doors of reggae to the world, because most people don't know this. Imagine Jamaica in 1958, an island freshly independent from British rule, where poverty suffocated most of the population, where children grew up watching their parents work themselves to the bone for almost nothing, where there was no visible future beyond repeating the cycle of misery that came from generations. And it's exactly in this scenario that James Chambers is born in St. Catherine, the second youngest of 9 children in a family that barely had food to eat, in a house where music was the only luxury that didn't cost money, where the sounds coming from the neighbor's sound system filled this boy's imagination with possibilities that the surrounding reality brutally denied. And comment there if you can imagine what it was like to have a giant dream in a place that told you every day that you were nothing. This boy started writing songs while still in primary school, scribbling lyrics on any paper he could find, melodies sprouting from his head while he listened to those hypnotic rhythms of ska and mento that pulsed through the streets of Kingston. And at just 14 years old, he made the bravest decision of his life. He told his father he wanted to try his luck in the capital, that he wanted to be a singer, that he wanted to make music. And surprisingly, his father took him to Kingston, and it was there that James Chambers became Jimmy Cliff, a name that was literally an allusion to the peaks he hoped to scale in his career. And answer me in the comments, would you have the courage to leave everything at 14 to pursue a dream that seems impossible? Kingston in the 60s was a city boiling with creative energy, but also brutal competition. Everyone wanted to be a singer, everyone had a song, everyone thought they'd be the next star, and Jimmy knocked door to door, studio to studio, being rejected repeatedly. Producers looked at that skinny boy and sent him away, said he had nothing special, that he should go home and forget this craziness. But Jimmy had a stubbornness that came from deep in his soul, an absolute refusal to accept failure as destiny. And one night, walking the streets after another day of rejections, he saw a record store and restaurant closing, pushed the door, entered uninvited, and convinced one of the owners, Leslie Kong, to get into the recording business starting with him. And comment there if you think this was luck or if it was pure determination that created its own luck. The first singles didn't amount to anything, failed commercially, and for a moment it seemed that maybe all those producers who rejected Jimmy were right. Maybe he was just another kid with a dream too big for reality. But then came Hurricane Hattie, a song about a real hurricane that devastated Central America, and out of nowhere it exploded, played on all Jamaican radios. Everyone knew that melody, and Jimmy Cliff at 17 had his first big hit. And tell me in the comments if you've heard of this song, because it was huge in Jamaica even though the rest of the world didn't know it yet. During the 60s, Jimmy continued releasing local hits, King of Kings, Dearest Beverly, Miss Jamaica, songs that dominated the Jamaican charts, that played on all sound systems, that made people dance in the streets. But there was a frustration growing inside him, because he looked at the success he had in Jamaica and knew that was only a fraction of what it could be. He saw American and British artists dominating the world with songs he thought were inferior to his. And he thought, why can't reggae conquer the entire planet? Why is this incredible music imprisoned on a small island while the world doesn't even know it exists? And comment there if you've felt this frustration of knowing you're good at something, but opportunities don't appear. In 1964, Jimmy signed with Island Records, Chris Blackwell's label that would later also sign Bob Marley, and he moved to the United Kingdom to London, where he was a complete unknown, where people looked at him with curiosity and sometimes with prejudice, where he had to start almost from scratch in a giant cold city that had nothing to do with the warmth and colors of Jamaica. But Jimmy had a mission now. He wasn't there just for personal success. He was there to open doors for all of reggae, to show the world that this music deserved global attention, and tell me in the comments if you think he accomplished this mission or not. In 1967, he released Hard Road to Travel, his first international album, and started touring Europe, playing in places where people had never heard those rhythms, had never felt that particular swing of reggae, and slowly things started happening. In 1969, he released Wonderful World, Beautiful People, a song that reached the top 25 of Billboard in the United States. Imagine that. A boy from Jamaica, who 10 years ago was being rejected by everyone, was now on the American charts, playing on radios, alongside the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and that song had a beautiful message of peace and unity that resonated with the hippie movement of the time, but also had that unmistakable groove of reggae that made everyone move. And comment if you know this song because it's an absolute classic. But what really changed everything, what really blew the door open and let reggae into the global consciousness, was The Harder They Come in 1972. And this story deserves full attention because it was a cultural watershed. Perry Henzell, a Jamaican filmmaker, wanted to make a film about the raw reality of Jamaica, about violence, poverty, the corrupt music industry, about how a talented young person could be crushed by the system, and he wanted Jimmy Cliff as the protagonist, and Jimmy accepted, to play Ivanhoe Martin, a country boy who arrives in Kingston with dreams of being a singer but finds only exploitation, corruption, and violence. And life imitates art in a scary way because Jimmy was basically telling a dramatized version of his own journey. And answer me in the comments if you've seen this film because it's considered one of the most important in Caribbean cinema history. The Harder They Come was made on a ridiculously low budget, filmed on the real streets of Kingston, with actors who were often ordinary people from the community, without any Hollywood glamour. It was raw cinema, authentic, visceral, and the soundtrack, my God, the soundtrack. Jimmy singing You Can Get It If You Really Want, Many Rivers to Cross, the title track The Harder They Come, and other songs by Jamaican artists like Desmond Decker and Toots and the Maytals. That soundtrack became the gateway to reggae for millions of people around the world. And comment there if you know any of these songs because they're absolutely timeless. When the film premiered in 1972, it wasn't an immediate commercial success. The big studios didn't want to distribute it, thought it was too violent, too political, too Jamaican for international audiences. But it started playing in alternative cinemas, in universities, in independent film festivals, and something magical started happening. University students in America stood in line for hours to see that film. Punks in England, completely identified with that anger and rebellion, black activists in the United States, saw in that character a reflection of their own struggles against systemic oppression. Revolutionaries in Latin America felt that message of resistance resonate deeply, and suddenly, The Harder They Come was a global cult phenomenon. And tell me in the comments if you think a film can really change culture so profoundly. The soundtrack sold millions of copies, stayed on the charts for years, introduced reggae to people who had never heard that sound before, and suddenly everyone wanted to know more about that music from Jamaica, about those hypnotic rhythms, those lyrics of resistance and hope. And this was the cue for other Jamaican artists to start conquering international space. And yes, Bob Marley benefited enormously from this path that Jimmy Cliff had opened. And here comes a part of the story that's both inspiring and sad, because in the following years it was Marley who exploded to worldwide super fame. It was Marley who became the face of reggae. It was Marley who everyone knew. And comment in the comments if you think this was fair or not. Jimmy had to deal with a brutal reality. He had literally opened the doors. He had been the first to bring reggae to the international mainstream. He had proven that this music could conquer the world. But it was another artist who was receiving all the glory, all the recognition, all the spotlights. And this could have destroyed him, could have filled him with bitterness and resentment, could have made him give up. But Jimmy Cliff had something special inside him, a resilience that came from those years of rejection in Kingston, a bigger perspective on what really mattered, and he continued making music, continued touring, continued being himself. And answer me in the comments if you would have this strength to continue after seeing someone receive credit for the path you opened. In the 70s, Jimmy went through profound transformations. He traveled to Africa, dove into spiritual questioning, converted to Islam, and adopted the name El Hajj Naim Bachir. And this spiritual journey brought new layers to his music. His lyrics became more philosophical, more contemplative, deeper. He released Give Thanks in 1978, an album that reflected this new spiritual consciousness, but maintained that irresistible groove of reggae, with songs like Bongo Man and Love Again. And he wasn't trying to compete with Marley or anyone else. He was on his own path, finding his own voice, and comment if you think this spiritual maturity made him a better artist or not. The 80s brought a beautiful resurgence in his career. In 1982, he released the single Reggae Night, which was a huge hit, reached the top 10 in several countries, played in all the discos. That groove was irresistible, impossible not to dance. And suddenly, Jimmy was back in the international spotlight. A new generation that maybe didn't even know The Harder They Come was discovering his music. And he proved he wasn't a one-era artist, that he had timeless relevance, that he could reinvent himself and conquer new audiences. And in 1985, he won his first Grammy for Best Reggae Recording with the album Cliffhanger. Recognition from the industry that had ignored him for so long, and tell me in the comments if you remember Reggae Night, because that song is addictive. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Jimmy continued releasing albums consistently, continued touring the whole world, playing giant festivals, packed theaters, small clubs. The size of the venue didn't matter. He gave everything in each performance, and those who saw Jimmy Cliff live in that era say it was a transcendent experience. His energy on stage was contagious, the charisma was magnetic. He had that rare gift of making an audience of 10,000 people feel like he was singing directly to each individual, and his old songs gained new life in live performances. Many Rivers to Cross, sung with thousands of voices in unison, created moments of pure unity that made people cry with emotion. And comment if you were lucky enough to see him live, or if you wish you'd had that chance. In 1993, another magical moment happened in his career. He recorded I Can See Clearly Now, a version of Johnny Nash's song for the Cool Runnings soundtrack, that film about the Jamaican bobsled team at the Winter Olympics. And that version by Jimmy exploded, reached number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100, played on radios worldwide, became an anthem of optimism and overcoming, and again, a new generation was discovering Jimmy Cliff. Children who watched Cool Runnings left the cinema singing that song, and decades later when they grew up, they still remembered that sound, that unmistakable voice, that message of hope. And answer me in the comments if you met Jimmy Cliff through Cool Runnings, because many people had that first contact that way. What many people don't realize is the massive influence Jimmy had on musical movements that apparently had nothing to do with reggae. British punk of the 70s was profoundly influenced by him. Bands like The Clash cited Jimmy Cliff as fundamental inspiration. They saw in him that same rebellious energy, that refusal to bow to the system, that raw authenticity they sought. Joe Strummer spoke openly about how The Harder They Come had changed his vision of music and politics. And you can hear that reggae influence in The Clash's songs, that characteristic offbeat, those lyrics of resistance. And it wasn't just punk. Hip-hop artists sampled his songs. Electronic music producers used those grooves as a base. Pop singers worldwide covered his classics. And comment in the comments which musical style you think was most influenced by Jimmy Cliff. In 2010, finally came recognition that was decades overdue. Jimmy Cliff was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with ABBA, Genesis, the Hollies, and the Stooges, and he became only the second Jamaican to enter that hall after Bob Marley. And when he went up on that stage to receive the honor, he didn't make a speech of ego or vanity. He pointed to Jamaica, to the culture that shaped him, to the people who came before him and opened paths, to the artists who came after and continued expanding reggae. He used that moment not to glorify himself, but to elevate everyone around him, and that showed the character of the man, the genuine humility that always defined him. And tell me in the comments if you think this humility is what kept him from having the same fame as Marley, or if it was just circumstances. In 2012, he won another Grammy, this time for Best Reggae Album with Rebirth, proving once again that even at almost 70, he was still creating relevant music, still evolving as an artist, still had something important to say, and he continued touring tirelessly, traveling the world, bringing that message of hope and resistance to new audiences. And it was incredible to see him in his 70s with more energy on stage than 20-year-old artists, jumping, dancing, interacting with the audience. Each show was a celebration of life, of music, of the human capacity to overcome adversity, and those who had the privilege of being at these late-career performances say they were unforgettable experiences. Comment there if you know anyone who saw him in recent years. His songs continued being discovered by new generations through film soundtracks, commercials, streaming playlists. You Can Get It If You Really Want became a motivational anthem used by athletes before competitions, by entrepreneurs launching businesses, by students preparing for difficult exams, by anyone facing challenges that seem impossible. That simple but powerful message that you can get it if you really want it resonated universally across cultures, languages, generations, and many. Rivers to Cross became one of the most covered songs in history. Hundreds of versions by artists from all genres, each bringing their own interpretation, but all recognizing the genius of the original composition. And answer me in the comments which of these two songs impacts you more. Jimmy Cliff built a legacy that goes far beyond sales numbers or chart positions. He fundamentally changed global perception about Caribbean music. He proved that artists from small peripheral countries could compete on equal footing with the great musical powers. He opened doors not only for Jamaican musicians, but for artists from all of Latin America, Africa, Asia. He showed that authenticity and quality transcend borders, that you don't need to abandon your roots to conquer the world. In fact, your roots are exactly what makes you special, what differentiates you, what makes your voice unique amid the noise. And comment in the comments if you agree that authenticity is more important than trying to fit what the market expects. Over decades, Jimmy gave countless interviews where he shared wisdom accumulated from an extraordinary life. He talked about the importance of persisting even when everything seems lost, about how failures are just steps on the ladder of success, about maintaining dignity and integrity even when the world offers you morally questionable shortcuts, about gratitude as an antidote against bitterness, about faith not only in God but in yourself and your own potential. And these lessons resonated deeply, because they came from someone who had lived all that. They weren't empty platitudes from a self-help guru. They were truths forged in the fire of real experience, and tell me in the comments which of these lessons you most need to hear at this moment in your life. In Jamaica, he's venerated as a national treasure, one of the most important figures in the country's cultural history. He received the Jamaican Order of Merit, the highest honor the government can grant for achievements in arts and sciences. And when he played in Kingston, the streets stopped. Entire generations gathered. Grandfathers who had danced ska in the 60s stood beside grandchildren discovering those rhythms for the first time. And there was something deeply beautiful in this intergenerational connection that his music created, how he was a point of union between past, present, and future of Jamaican culture, and comment if you think few artists managed to create this kind of timeless legacy. And now comes the part of the story that will surprise you, and that shows who Jimmy Cliff really was inside. Despite decades of international success, millions of records sold, tours around the world, Grammy Awards, and Hall of Fame induction, Jimmy accumulated a fortune estimated between $10 and $15 million at the end of his life. He had properties, smart investments, copyrights that generated constant passive income. He had built real financial security through decades of hard work and smart decisions about his career and his masters. But here's the detail. Most people don't know. Jimmy Cliff lived like an ordinary person. He didn't have ostentatious mansions, didn't walk around with giant entourages, didn't spend money on extravagant luxuries just to show status. He maintained a surprisingly simple and humble lifestyle, and comment in the comments if this surprises you or if it makes complete sense considering who he was. He could have lived like a rock star, could have bought absurdly expensive cars, yachts, private jets, all that paraphernalia that celebrities use to display wealth. But Jimmy made completely different choices. He invested in education in Jamaica, supported health programs, helped young artists who were starting out, used money to make real difference in other people's lives instead of accumulating status symbols. He lived in comfortable but not extravagant houses, walked normally through the streets, talked to fans without barriers, maintained genuine connection with ordinary people. And this wasn't performance or public image strategy. It was simply who he was, a man who never forgot where he came from, who never let success go to his head, who understood that real wealth isn't in how much you have, but in how much you give, and the positive impact you leave. And answer me in the comments if you know other millionaire artists who live with all this humility. This choice to live simply despite wealth said everything about his values, about what really mattered to Jimmy Cliff. He had seen so many artists destroyed by fame and money, losing themselves in excesses, in inflated ego, in complete detachment from reality, and he consciously chose a different path. He chose to keep his feet on the ground, maintain connection with community, maintain perspective on what really brings happiness and fulfillment in life, and maybe exactly because of this he managed to maintain his career for over 6 decades without burning out, without becoming a caricature of himself, without losing that authenticity that was always his trademark. Comment if you think this humility was one of the keys to his career longevity. When Jimmy Cliff died in November 2025 at 81 years old, after complications from pneumonia following a seizure, the world lost not only a music giant but an extraordinary human being. Tributes came from all corners of the planet, from music legends, from anonymous fans, from governments, from cultural organizations, and what was consistently repeated in tributes was admiration not only for talent, but for character, for decency, for humility, for generosity of spirit that he demonstrated throughout his entire life. And his songs had a sudden increase in streaming. New generations discovering that incredible catalog, those timeless melodies, those lyrics that remain relevant decades after being written, and comment in the comments if you discovered or rediscovered Jimmy Cliff after he died. Jimmy Cliff's story is fundamentally about resilience, about persisting when everyone says you won't make it, about opening doors for others even when no one opened them for you, about maintaining integrity and authenticity in a world that constantly pressures you to sell out, about using talent not only for personal gain, but to elevate an entire culture, an entire people, an entire art form. He proved that a poor boy from a Jamaican village can literally change global culture, can introduce new sounds to billions of people, can leave a legacy that transcends time and space, and he did all this while maintaining humility, maintaining connection with roots, maintaining perspective on what really matters in life. And tell me in the comments if this story inspired you or made you reflect on your own choices and values. If you made it this far, now you understand why Jimmy Cliff deserved much more recognition than he got. Why he should be mentioned in the same breath as Bob Marley when talking about reggae. Why his contribution to world music is incalculable. And maybe the greatest injustice is how many people know his songs without knowing they were his. How many times you can get it if you really want played somewhere and someone sang along without knowing who wrote it. How many times many rivers to cross, moved someone without that person knowing the artist behind it. So do this. Share this video, comment which Jimmy Cliff song most marked you, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Because stories like this need to be told. Artists like this need to be remembered. And if you really want to honor his legacy, listen to the complete catalog. Dive into those songs. Let those grooves move you. Let those lyrics inspire you. And when you listen, remember that 14-year-old boy walking the dusty road with nothing but dreams. And remember that he proved you really can get it if you really want it. No matter where you come from, no matter how many doors close in your face, no matter how many times they say you're not good enough, you can make it. You can leave your mark on the world. And you can do it while keeping your essence, your humility, your humanity intact. That's the final lesson from Jimmy Cliff. That's the heritage he left. Comment down there what you thought of this story, and let's keep alive the memory of this giant that the world never gave proper value to.